While this is out of order, I felt that it would be important to follow the Dominion War series with a look at DS9's Nor the Battle Too Strong. I find it to be an interesting look at how the Klingons act, as well as a wonderful piece on war. Let's just get into it. One of the things I love about this episode is its focus on Jake. We rarely get to see a story that's focused on this character specifically, which is unfortunate. The character is largely used as a prop for Benjamin Sisko, a supporting character in almost every sense of the word. And I hate that because I think Sarek Lofton is quite a good actor. The episode begins with Jake trying to write a bio of Bashir for a news outlet and finds that it's not as easy as it looks. This, to me, shows that Jake is really new to being a journalist, as he feels like he needs a plague or a war to make it interesting. We find out that this is his first writing gig, which is kind of comforting to know that news agencies of the future are just like now. They're not worried about journalists who have a background or can actually do the job, just someone that can write a puff piece. While Jake and Bashir are on their way back to the station, the Klingon War breaks out again. Agilon Prime is under siege, with Klingon troops landing and invading settlements, and the main hospital has already been hit hard. We can't be sure why Agilon Prime was attacked, whether it was a strategic move or the first thing the Klingons could find. We also can't be sure why the Klingons renege on the peace negotiations, though given what we know of the species at this point, it doesn't really take much to set them off. What we do know is that the Federation forces are taking an absolute beating. It looks as if the colony is going to fall, with 2 settlements already under Klingon control. What I think is odd is that the Klingons are clearly in control over both the planet and the space around it. They are able to get troops on the ground, and the Federation can't stop them. The colonists are even moving things underground to protect against attacks, so why aren't Klingon ships orbiting the planet? The runabout comes in and is able to orbit the planet unopposed and set down somewhere. It's possible the Klingons left, maybe they are back to a blitzkrieg mentality, attacking a planet, setting down troops, and then moving on. But that seems short-sighted. That said, it really is the only plausible explanation I have, however, so let me know if you guys can think of anything else. Regardless, the shuttle sets down, and finally Jake gets to see what war really looks like. Namely, that there are a lot of hurt people and as many, if not more, dead people. And that's the summation of war in a nutshell, isn't it? Soldiers, usually young, running into battle and being brought back behind the lines in stretchers or in body bags. And unfortunately, it's not just the soldiers that pay the price, we see children as well. It's one of the first sobering events that Jake experiences. The writing of the episode at this point, I think, is done very well, as we see almost immediately after a child being comforted and moved away, a man stumbling in, claiming to be hit in the leg with a disruptor. It's discovered that he wasn't hit with a disruptor, but a phaser. Interestingly, everyone assumes that the man did it to himself, which he did. However, it is possible that a Klingon had utilized a phaser in the midst of combat, and the man just described a disruptor because it's war and things get confusing. Though, as stated, he actually did do it to himself, and I won't be revisiting his story specifically, but the attitudes of how he is attended to are both natural and telling. The man is treated as if he has betrayed his uniform. First, it shows how understanding and sympathetic the evolved humans are to look at him as lesser, but it's also understandable that they do. People are dying out there every day. Entire settlements are struggling for their freedom, and here he was, trying to get out of it by shooting himself in the leg. What's sad is that we can all see ourselves in this man, not wanting to die, but we all hope that we're better than him. Jake is pulled into service and becomes one of the orderlies that assists with the living and the dead. He helps to take the deceased to the morgue to get the wounded on biobeds, and he sees what happens in war when someone dies. They are put into a body bag and thrown in a pile, anklets attached so it's shown who they are. As Jake continues to assist, he doesn't even notice that his uniform is becoming more and more covered in blood. Everyone in the hospital was waiting for Starfleet to come and save them. Unfortunately, relief wouldn't come to Agilon Prime, as the USS Farragut, a ship tasked with saving them, is caught off guard and destroyed. Let's pause a moment. Once Sisko realizes the Farragut has been destroyed, he takes the Defiant to go and assist. We'll ignore the fact that previously he didn't want the vessel moved from the station for any reason due to the Klingon War originally, and now is okay with it because it's his son. We'll give him that, again it's his son. But in a military structure, generally you have to get approval to make movements of valued military assets. Especially if you are moving the only ship from a very strategic and vital place to one that is arguably not as important. We have no indication that Sisko ever got approval, and it's clear he is doing it to ensure his son is safe. How does he not get in trouble for this? Yeah, it's a nitpick, I'll grant, but it's worth discussing. Moving on with the episode, I can't help but chuckle a bit. In my past video, a couple of people stated that the Klingons never took Arcanus, and yet, in this episode, it's clearly stated that the Federations pull out. Now, you could argue that they hadn't pulled out before, but even then, the hold on the Arcanus sector had to be pretty weak. Insert sexual joke here. We see a nice little piece between Bashir and another doctor who discusses who is heading up the effort to retake the Arcanus sector, including the USS Tecumseh. Her husband is aboard the ship, he's a science officer, and we see that the war is much bigger than just those who are in the series. The episode moves back to Jake, working as a grunt. He's approached by one of the orderlies who discusses how badly the fight is going. One of the security personnel estimate that the colony will be overran and the Klingons will take it in a day or so. This terrifies Jake, and he even talks about it in his article. He discusses how it felt different being on a planet versus when he's on Deep Space Nine and that station is under attack. He considers how it may be due to his father not being there, but I have to agree with the first theory that he states. He's actually seeing what real war is like. When you're on a station behind a barrier and you don't see the death, the carnage, it's not as real. Everything changes when you have to look a man in the eyes who's dead. That's not to say there isn't misery when the station is attacked, but to be more in a situation where it is completely hopeless and you don't have a large space station with big weapons on it, it's dissimilar to say the least. Jake doesn't even realize how screwed he is just yet. We'll discuss that after this. Hey guys, so thanks to it being summer, all of your favorite YouTubers, me included, are seeing a reduction in people watching their stuff. If you'd like to see the content continue, consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/Lore Reloaded, or become a member of YouTube by clicking the join button below. You can get all the tiers you get on Patreon, and you don't have to worry about dealing with that company. Once I've gotten roughly about $300 more that I need to make monthly, well, 300 as of this episode, that of course fluctuates, I'll be able to fast-track full hour-long video breakdowns of movies, starting with all of the Trek movies that you know and love. If you can or don't want to, hey, just continue to watch. I love to have you as a viewer. Either way, thanks for the support. As Jake and the others sleep, a massive explosion rocks their location. The Klingons have hit the main power source of the facility, and both he and Bashir must travel to the runabout to get generators so that they can keep the power on. If they don't, people are going to die. Jake and Bashir can't utilize transporters due to the shielding, and there aren't any other generators available in the facility. So they'll have to travel about a kilometer away. For those, like me, who don't utilize kilometers, that's just shy of a mile, roughly about 0.62 of a mile to be exact. Here's a question. Why did they land the runabout so far away? I mean, it's possible it's the closest place, but the area they came out of seems to have plenty of landing area. Additionally, the runabout would likely grant a huge advantage. Sure, the Klingons are shooting hoppers left and right out of the sky, but from what we understand in dialogue, a runabout is much stronger than a hopper ever could be, and the Klingons have no ships in space. Or at least they didn't. You could utilize the shuttle for orbital bombardment, perhaps to take out those jammers that are preventing transport, or to give covering fire for the settlements. Again, I'm sure we could come up with reasons why it's not there, but that's doing the work for the writers at this point. Back to the episode, Bashir and Jake make their way towards the runabout and come under shelling. Bashir is hit right in front of Jake, and now, with chaos happening all around him, watching what appears to be his protector and guardian on the ground, possibly dead, the evolved human Jake turns around and runs. He runs even though he knows that half of the people in the medical ward will die if he doesn't get that generator. That people are counting on him. While some may judge Jake for this, I honestly don't. He's only acting human. It's really easy to judge someone when you're not in that situation. Jake races in random directions, finding himself falling over dead Klingons with red blood, apparently. He has somehow stumbled onto a battlefield, and while continuing on even faster after seeing that, he runs over a hill and is hit with the butt of a blaster rifle to his face. He finds a dying security officer, the man that assaulted him because he thought Jake was a Klingon. The security personnel asks for a hypo, and Jake passes it to him. The officer is hurt, his uniform in tatters and blood everywhere. He demands that Jake helps set him up. He wants to die looking into the sky. His duty had been simple. He was to defend and assist his platoon so that they could get in a hopper and get off the ground. Given the lack of wreckage, it would seem that they were successful, though we never find out whether it was or wasn't for sure. The evolved human Jake tries to justify to himself why he abandoned all those people to their deaths at the medical ward. He ultimately is able to talk himself into believing that there is a higher purpose for him running, to find the security officer and bring him back. Given that a large majority, if not all, Terrans don't believe in a god or gods, the security officer doesn't let him get away with it. The officer would die telling him that he made the wrong choice, and life doesn't grant absolution in that way. Jake, horrified at what he's seen and what he's done, runs back to the hospital. I'll say this, dude has some stamina on him and is crazy fit. Everyone is happy to see him. He would come to find that Bashir got back to the compound by himself with the generator. A job that was meant for 2 people was done by him, though in future episodes we find out that he is superhuman, so not as big of a feat. When Bashir sees Jake, he's relieved and apologetic for leaving him behind, which only makes Jake feel worse. Now, I've given Jake a lot of guff throughout this analysis, calling him an evolved human as a way of mocking him, but at roughly the 33-minute mark, Jake admits that he is a coward and is afraid, that he doesn't feel that he can be relied on. While some may find this pathetic, I think it's probably one of the more admirable traits. I say this unironically when I think that this is what an evolved human would do. Jake is facing who and what he is, which is more than what we do today, dealing with much less. The last point when Jake would be reminded of his mortality without having to defend himself would be when his friends start joking about the deaths that they would be facing. We don't see them again, and that's a shame. I would have loved to have seen them reading his article and how they felt about it. However, to hone in on the piece and not talk about what wouldn't be, all of them are joking and relaxed as I've mentioned. This again is something natural and even human, though some of them aren't that said species. Laughter is a great way to deal with peril and the ending of your life. In fact, let it be said now that when I die at my funeral, I want there to be a comedian there, and I want there to be someone making balloon animals if any kids come. I mean, how cool would that be? Comedy is a coping mechanism like anything else. Unfortunately, Jake's guilt prevents him from allowing them to have that. He yells at them and brings reality down crashing on them. All of that would be brief and wouldn't last though, as the next thing Jake knows, the compound is being attacked. People are trying to get the wounded out as the Klingons assault the hospital directly. Jake finds himself under a table until he can't stay there any longer and is forced back with the security personnel who attempt to defend him and the others. They pay it with their lives. With both officers killed and no other real option, Jake picks up a phaser rifle and begins firing on the Klingons. Though he uses the rifle wildly, the charge is causing the cave to fall in. By bringing the ceiling down and sealing off the cave entrance, the entirety of the hospital staff and their patients are able to get away. He saved everyone. The writer would be called a hero, though Jake didn't consider himself such. In my mind, I do think he was one, though. Whether we do an act out of cowardice, fear, or bravery to save a person, the result is the same. People are saved. Our emotions don't necessarily have to be negative when used appropriately. Jake picked up a phaser because he didn't want to die, and people were saved. Do you think those patients gave a damn that he did it out of fear? And honestly, should we? I don't think so. The attack on Agilon Prime, its uselessness, and the Klingons going after a medical facility will be discussed in another video. Ultimately, I think that this was a great episode on how civilians, even evolved ones, deal in these scenarios. But those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below.